Hello everyone, my name is Toby from the International Association for Political Science Students, and we are live again here from the World Congress of the International Political Science Association. I'm very happy to have with me here today Professor Ilter Turan. Welcome.
Yes, thank you. It's nice to be here with you. Yes.
And we're talking today with Professor Turan about IPSA, the IPSA World Congress, because as some of you have been watching previous videos today, the IPSA World Congress is one of the largest of its kind in the world of political science. But maybe you give us an overview. Where are we right now? What is the IPSA World Congress?
Okay. Well, let me begin by introducing myself. You gave my name, but the particular position I occupy now in IPSA is the outgoing president. It means I have a couple more days as president and I'll be leaving. But, in terms of where IPSA stands today, we have managed over the years to expand into an organization that has close to 4,000 members. It's slightly below it, but not very far. And we have quite a large number of countries, national associations that are members, something like 75 national associations are members. We have individual members from non-member countries as well, and we also have some institutional members. So it has over the years evolved into a highly representative organization. When you look at the number of countries that are members, one should not compare it to an organization like the United Nations, because not every country has a very large political science community, and we are an academic organization. So generally, those countries that have an academic community of political scientists become members. And of course, in order for that to happen, two things have to be together. One of them, the academic community have to be of a sufficient size, and then there has to be some major liberties to organize in a society as a professional organization. But I think we have become a highly inclusive, representative organization of the global political science community.
Mm-hmm. So when you're saying there has been a certain development, can you maybe point out from the time you have joined IPSA or you got first into contact with IPSA till now, what are the things you experienced in the change during this period in IPSA?
Well, if you shall allow me, I shall go even further back and go back to the history of IPSA and its evolution, because, IPSA is one of the various organizations developed after the Second World War under the efforts of UNESCO initially to develop international academic communities. And it started out with very few countries, generally United States and Western Europe, but particularly after 1960, it began to expand. And it has become more inclusive over time. Now, as regards my own personal affiliation with IPSA, the first IPSA affair that I attended was the World Congress of Political Science, I believe, in Edinburgh, Scotland in 1976. And I have attended most of their meetings afterwards. As you are well aware, since this is a global organization, we try to move our World Congress from one location to another in a different part of the world each time we meet. So over the years, we have met on the one hand in Seoul, Korea, Moscow, Fukuoka, Japan, and on the other hand, we have also met in Brazil, in Rio de Janeiro, in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and much later in Santiago, Chile. And we have, of course, met also in Paris and Berlin and Washington, D.C., and Montreal and Quebec City. So we move around the world. And this time we are meeting in Brisbane, Australia, which is a first in the history, because this is, in comparison to other places, is a very long distance to come. Nevertheless, we have managed to attract almost 2,500 scholars that have come to attend our World Congress. And when we started out, the World Congresses were held every 3 years. And during the last 10 years, the interval has been reduced to 2 because the organization has grown. Maybe the world political science community has expanded. And it clearly seemed that a 3-year interval was simply too long. And since there are some limits to how many days you can hold a Congress and how many sessions you can have at the same time, the 3-year interval simply reduced the opportunities for the global community of political scientists to come together, give papers, etc. And now we meet every 2 years. We have more than 50 research committees, and the research committees themselves do organize other meetings than the World Congress, and IPSA itself organizes in-between Congress meetings occasionally. In fact, last December, for example, we met in Hanover, Germany, and we dealt with the question of digitalization of political science. So we try to keep up with not only developments in the discipline, but also the challenges that we meet as political scientists and the challenges which we feel we have to address as political scientists. In fact, for example, in Lisbon in 2020, we are going to be dealing with the question of the challenges to globalization, particularly the challenge of populism and neo-nationalism.
Mm-hmm. Globalization actually is I think not only a theme for Lisbon, but basically thinking about IPSA. IPSA as a whole is kind of the idea of globalizing also political science to a certain degree. And I'm interested in how do you experience right now in Brisbane, but also before. What does it make with certain researchers when you have researchers from Belgium, researchers from India, researchers from Canada coming all together? Does this increasing effort of IPSA, of other organizations to bring researchers together, this globalizing effect, does it also have an effect then on the research that is done?
Well, inevitably it does. Now, we must recognize that we couldn't give the entire credit to IPSA for what's happening in the world of political science, because there has been significant developments. Number one, there is a much wider circulation of materials than ever before. Books and journal articles are much more easy to access these days than they were in the past because of the electronic revolution. This has made it also possible for virtual communities of researchers to form. But we do provide an opportunity when we organize these World Congresses for people that may know of each other but that have never met to come together. Secondly, sometimes, the scholars get to discover other people that they did not know before. So it's an activity that is sort of oriented toward a variety of goals. Obviously, intellectual stimulation, discussion of new approaches, but at the same time, networking. People meet other people, which then leads to joint products, be it in the form of a research project or co-authoring books, etc. So, and of course, the World Congresses themselves and the papers given there, particularly within the framework of research committees, have constituted the grounds on which many published efforts have appeared.
Mm-hmm. Looking from a student perspective, coming as an undergraduate to a university in the beginning, the job as a professor seems to be far more focused and concentrated only on doing research, on teaching, but there are actually far more ways how many professors, how many scholars get active, and IPSA is one of those ways how you can become active beyond your academic career. What was for you? Why was IPSA important for you personally? Why did you decide to become active beyond these academic enterprises?
Of course, when I started taking an interest in IPSA, the electronic revolution had not yet taken place. And it was at the time even more important to be in communications with other scholars by attending international conferences. But once I began attending, I discovered that I benefited a lot from that. I learned a lot from the papers given. I learned a lot from talking to people. Even the book exhibits at the World Congress made me aware of publications that I was not aware of. There were occasions when we got together to publish special issues of journals, etc. So I found it to be professionally highly stimulating, and I also found it to be particularly rewarding to break out of a national community and be in contact with people. And I must say that I got to know people through IPSA that I would not have had the opportunity to know probably if I hadn't attended these conferences. So that stimulated by my interest. I then became involved in the management side of it. In 2000, I was elected to the executive committee for the first time. Then in 2003, I was elected again and became one of the vice presidents. Then I was asked to serve as the program chair of the World Congress in 2009 in Santiago, Chile. And so my affiliation with IPSA continued, and then is also quite involved in the Turkish political science community and making sure that they would have close relations with IPSA. I continued my contacts, and there came a moment when it became possible for me to offer my candidacy for the presidency, and my colleagues were kind enough to accord me that honor. So.
What would you define as your most important points during the presidency?
Well, of course, when you come in, a number of things you discover need attention. I think one of them is essentially improving the management of the organization. I did work on this. And secondly, I did work on improvement of academic freedoms, although our ability to affect outcomes are rather limited. And third, I think, one of the jobs of the president is to plan for the future, and this I did not only by introducing organizational changes, but also planning the World Congress for 2020. So that, of course, our World Congress, one must understand, is our most important activity, so it needs a lot of attention and energy.
Yeah. You were mentioning that one of your highlights was academic freedom. Yeah. How exactly does an academic organization consisting of scholars work?
We try to do several things. You run into two types of different problems. One of them is a transformation of the academic environment, and secondly, individuals that have been targets or objects of violations of academic freedom. Like, I'll give you examples of things that we've done. In the case of a colleague that had lost her job in a university in the Far East, we wrote a brief to the court on her behalf, expressing our concern. On the other hand, when, for example, the American president introduced restrictions on travel, we issued a statement along with a number of other organizations, naturally, where we indicated that these actions would seriously impede academic activities. In the case of one country, that it introduced new conditions which would make it very difficult for non-native institutions to survive. We again issued a statement, and I actually also had the opportunity to talk to a leader of the parliament of that country and asking him to stop this. It was not effective, mind you. I mean, because when you deal with questions of academic freedom, there are several instruments available to you, including personal contacts, issuing statements, working with others as well. But you are also constrained because you don't want your actions to make things even more difficult for people that are being targets. And secondly, you don't want to reveal your sources of information and get them hurt. Most often political leaders do not attach sufficient importance to the opinion of the academic community. But, I mean, you try to use the instruments that you have to be influential. I mean, there are occasions when some members get so frustrated that out of reasons to satisfy themselves more than change the environment, they will engage in sort of very strong protests. But our goal is not to satisfy ourselves, but to help our colleagues and institutions where academic freedoms are under challenge. And this requires a more patient, more sophisticated technology than just letting your emotions out.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor Turan.
All right. It's very nice to talk with you.
We are very happy that you joined us tonight, and wish you all the best for this World Congress, and also already look forward to the one in Lisbon.
All right. Thank you very
all
much.
The best.
And maybe by the time we meet in Lisbon, many of your members will have already become professors of political science and will join us there. Okay.
We will see, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right.